RuneScape Dragonwilds has been in early access for a couple of weeks now, and personally, I'm really enjoying this game. Even though, as it sits, there is definitely a lack of content and plenty of room for some growth, which is actually exactly what we're going to be talking about today, because we're going to be diving into the roadmap for Dragonwilds. Let's go ahead and start off here with a few of the obvious things that are missing, which should definitely be inside of the game, and that is the magic and range skill tree. Currently, as it stands, you can use magic and range in combat, but you cannot actively level up these skills. You can actually cheese out a few magic or range levels if you manage to find some tomes of experience. However, like I said, there is no skill tree, so you're essentially leveling these for no reason. And on top of these missing combat skill trees, I think that there are a few RuneScape skills that are missing, which could easily slot into Dragonwilds, such as prayer, for example, farming. I think that they could slot Slayer in there, and fishing would most definitely work. And honestly, that's just to name a few. However, thankfully, they do mention one of these skills being farming inside of this roadmap here, which is good because currently you have to run around the entire map looking for onions and cabbages on the ground. It's a big pain, and farming, in my opinion, should have definitely been in the game. Even if you couldn't level up the skill farming, same way you cannot level up the skill herblore or something like that, it should have been in the game to start with. At least the ability to plant some red berries or some potatoes or cabbages, what have you. And the way I look at it is things like farming missing from Dragonwilds is just one of several examples as to why this game maybe came out a little bit too early. I'll go more into detail about this in the full review that I'm working on. But let's go ahead and move forward in this roadmap here and break down this and more section where they list off a whole ton of things that they are working on, such as lesser dragons, new dragon slayer gear. They're working on masterwork weapons, which might actually give us a use for the monstrous fangs that we've been collecting. But they're also working on things like base expansion and building defenses up at your base, which will definitely help out with the war bands and all the damage that those can actually put out on your base. And it's a relief here to see that these smaller things are in the works, such as new vaults, a new crafting tier, presumably steel. But they actually also have something big in the works called Fell Hollow and the Soul Eater Imaru. Sure, I butchered that. This is set to be a new region and a new dragon overlord boss fight, presumably. It reads here that Fell Hollow is a region suspended between life and death, ruled over by the Soul Eater dragon Imaru, who is twisted by the wild anima of Ashenfall and the cursed energy of the underworld. They say that a well-known RuneScape character, Death, is going to be guiding and tasking players inside of this region, but be warned because ghosts as well as skeletons and undead ogres abound. This, I'm guessing, is going to be the northern portion of the map, at least a chunk of the northern portion of the map. And I think it's obvious that we can expect things to come out of this, like new quests, new crafting tiers, presumably getting coal to mix with iron for steel, along with obviously all of the enemies that they just mentioned, the skeleton and the undead and whatever. And honestly, all of this sounds great. However, this entire roadmap here is basically a prime example of why this game could have really used an extra 6 months or even a year in development, because currently as it stands, I've essentially completed the entire game. We've knocked out all of the quests. We basically have all of the highest gear that we can have, and we've got about 40 hours, just over 40 hours of playtime. And this was padded out pretty thick with several hours of building time. So realistically, you could probably power your way through this game in about 25, 30 hours max. And obviously this is all just early access. I'm going to dive more into this on the full review that I'm working on. Keep an eye out for that. But to quickly cap this whole roadmap off here, I want to talk about the ongoing improvements section where they talk about typical things that you would expect developers to be working on, such as performance improvements, combat improvements, balance changes, whatever. But they also mention multiplayer and difficulty modes, which kind of does pique my interest here. It'll be interesting to see how the multiplayer for Dragonwilds kind of evolves over time and what sort of difficulty modes come out over time, because in the and more section, they also mention a hardcore mode, which currently as it stands with the combat, I don't think I would partake in. A bit frustrating at times. However, hardcore mode is always an interesting way to play the game. Let me know down in the comments if you guys would be making a hardcore account. But that's all that I wanted to break down today. I hope you guys all have an amazing day. I'm out.